She felt her manager's hand yank her hair in front of 50 diners. Humiliated. Helpless. Then a Mafia boss at table 7 stood up, his voice quiet but absolute. What she didn't know, the man who defended her had sworn to leave violence behind. And saving her would pull him back into the very darkness he'd been running from. The wine glass shattered before Isabella Connie even realized what she'd done. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood at a crime scene, soaking into the expensive fabric and dripping onto the guest's lap. The woman, dripping in diamonds and fury, shrieked loud enough to silence the entire restaurant. "You clumsy idiot." Isabella's hands trembled as she grabbed napkins, her apologies tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Please let me." "Get away from me." The woman stood, her designer dress stained crimson. "This is a $3,000 Valentino." The dining room of Casa Verona had gone deathly quiet. 50 pairs of eyes watched the scene unfold. The soft jazz music from the corner suddenly felt inappropriate, almost mocking. Isabella's face burned with humiliation as she tried to salvage the situation, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, angry. Marco Ricci, the restaurant manager, stormed across the dining room floor like a bull seeing red. His face was twisted with rage, veins bulging at his temples. Isabella had seen that look before, usually right before someone got fired. "You stupid," he didn't finish the sentence. Instead, his hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of Isabella's dark hair, yanking her head back so violently that she gasped in pain. The napkins fell from her hands. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Ricci snarled, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and sour. "You're worthless. Absolutely worthless." This is the third mistake this week. Tears stung Isabella's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her, could sense the collective discomfort of the diners who suddenly found their plates very interesting. "Let go of me," she managed to choke out, her scalp screaming in pain. "You're fired," Ricci shouted, shaking her head like a rag doll. "Do you hear me? Fired. Get your things and let her go." The voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk, quiet, but somehow louder than Ricci's shouting. It carried authority that didn't need volume. Everyone turned. At table 7, near the window overlooking the Chicago skyline, a man stood slowly. He was younger than Isabella expected, maybe 35, with dark hair swept back, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and eyes that could freeze fire. He wasn't the loudest person in the room or the largest, but the moment he stood, he became the center of gravity. Everything pulled toward him. He carefully removed his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Isabella made in a year, and set it gently on the table. The gesture was casual, almost lazy, but something about it made Isabella's blood run cold. This wasn't a man preparing to make a scene. This was a man preparing for war. "I said," he repeated, his tone still conversational, still quiet, "let her go before you regret the next 10 seconds of your life." Ricci's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't release Isabella. His face flushed red with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "This is none of your business, sir. This is a staff matter." "It became my business the moment you put your hands on her." The man took a step forward. Just one. But something in the restaurant's atmosphere changed. 2 other men, large, silent, wearing suits that didn't quite hide their builds, stood from a nearby table. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Isabella felt Ricci's hand tremble in her hair. "Do you know who I am?" Ricci tried, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been managing this restaurant for 8 years. I have every right to discipline my staff as I." "You have 3 seconds." The man's voice dropped even lower, almost gentle now, which somehow made it more terrifying. 3. 2-inch. Ricci released Isabella so quickly she stumbled. He stepped back, hands raised, trying to salvage some dignity. "Fine. Fine." But she still fired. She's. No, the man walked forward now, each step measured and purposeful. He stopped next to Isabella, not looking at her, but keeping his eyes locked on Ricci. She's not fired. You are. Ricci laughed, a nervous, desperate sound. I don't think you understand how this works, sir. I'm the manager here. You can't just. I can. The man pulled out his phone, made a single call, and said 4 words. By Casa Verona. Tonight, he hung up. The entire interaction took less than 10 seconds. The restaurant held its collective breath. Ricci's face went from red to white. You can't. That's not. By tomorrow morning, I'll own this building and everything in it. The man finally turned to look at Isabella, his expression softening just slightly. Are you hurt? Isabella touched her scalp, still throbbing. She wanted to say something strong, something brave, but all that came out was, I'm fine. No, you're not, he turned back to Ricci. You have 60 seconds to leave before my patience runs out. I suggest you don't waste them. Ricci looked around desperately, hoping for support, for someone to challenge this stranger's authority. But the other diners looked away. The kitchen staff had gathered at the door, watching silently. Even the hostess seemed to shrink into the corner. The 2 bodyguards took a step closer. Ricci fled. He actually ran through the restaurant, knocking over a chair in his haste to reach the exit. The door slammed behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. The man straightened his cuffs, picked up his watch, and fastened it back onto his wrist. Then he turned to the entire restaurant and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, everyone's meal tonight is on me, including wine, dessert, whatever you want. And I apologize that your evening was interrupted by a man who forgot how to treat people with dignity. He pulled out a black credit card and handed it to the stunned hostess. Then, without another word, he walked toward the exit. Isabella stood frozen, her mind reeling. Who was this man? Why had he done that? And why did everyone in the restaurant look absolutely terrified of him? She made a decision before she could think it through. Wait. She ran after him, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind her, ignoring the pain in her scalp, ignoring every voice in her head that screamed this was a terrible idea. She caught him just outside the restaurant, in the alley that smelled of garlic and rain. You didn't save me, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Her emotions were all over the place. Gratitude, anger, confusion, something else she couldn't name. You just wanted to prove who's boss. He stopped, turned, and looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes. For a moment, she thought she saw surprise flicker across his face. Then something else, amusement, maybe, or respect. Maybe, he said, a half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Or maybe I just don't like watching men hurt women who work harder than them. They stood there in the Chicago night, 2 strangers connected by violence, and now, by something neither could name. And Isabella knew, with absolute certainty, that her life had just changed forever. The alley was cold, but Isabella's blood was running hot. So that's your thing? She said, crossing her arms. You swoop in, throw money around, and expect everyone to fall at your feet in gratitude. The man tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. His bodyguard stood a respectful distance away, near a black SUV with tinted windows, watching but not interfering. Most people would say thank you, he observed, his tone mild. I'm not most people. Isabella took a step closer, her fear evaporating in the face of her anger. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still pumping through her veins, and she was done being afraid, done being pushed around. You humiliated Ricci in there, made a big show, bought an entire restaurant just to prove a point. That's not kindness, that's ego. You're right, Isabella blinked. She'd been prepared for defensiveness, maybe arrogance. Not agreement. It was ego, he continued, leaning against the brick wall. He looked more relaxed now, less like the dangerous man from inside, and more like someone who might actually be human. About 60% ego. The other 40%? I really do hate bullies. Despite herself, Isabella felt her anger waver. 60%. Maybe 65, that half smile again. I'm being honest. I could have handled it quietly, paid for your legal fees, gotten Ricci fired through proper channels. But where's the fun in that? Fun. Isabella's voice rose. That was my job in there. My livelihood. Did it occur to you that maybe I needed that job? That maybe getting fired in a spectacular fashion, even if you're supposedly preventing it, might make it impossible for me to work anywhere else in this city? The smile faded. I didn't think of that. Of course you didn't. Isabella paced the narrow alley, her work shoes splashing through a puddle. Rich people never do. You see a problem, you throw money at it, and you assume that fixes everything. But I have rent due in 6 days. I have student loans. I have a life that doesn't include mysterious strangers buying restaurants on a whim. He pushed off from the wall, and suddenly he was closer than she'd realized. Not threatening, just present in a way that made the air feel thicker. What's your name? He asked. Why should I tell you? Because I'd like to know what to call the only person in Chicago brave enough to yell at me in an alley. Isabella hesitated. Something about the way he said it, without mockery, without condescension, made her defenses crack slightly.
Isabella Conti.
Adrian Moretti. He extended his hand. She stared at it. A handshake seemed absurdly formal after everything that had just happened, but she took it anyway. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Look, Isabella Conti, Adrian said, releasing her hand. You're right. I didn't think about the consequences for you. I saw a woman being assaulted by her boss, and I reacted. Maybe too strongly. Maybe selfishly. But I'm not apologizing for getting him away from you. I didn't ask you to apologize for that part. Isabella's voice was quieter now. Just, next time you want to play hero, maybe consider that the person you're saving might not want to be saved that way. There won't be a next time.
Why?
Because you've learned your lesson? She couldn't keep the sarcasm out of her voice. No. Adrian's expression turned serious. Because I meant what I said in there. By tomorrow morning, I'll own Casa Verona, and you'll have your job back if you want it. Better hours, better pay, and definitely a better manager. Isabella laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. You're actually serious? You're going to buy an entire restaurant because you got into an argument with the manager? I've made worse investments for worse reasons. That's insane. Probably, he shrugged, and for a moment, he looked younger. Less like the commanding presence from the dining room, and more like someone who was making things up as he went along. But I'm committed now. The call's been made. My people are already drawing up the papers. Your people, Isabella shook her head.
Who are you?
Some kind of real estate mogul? Tech billionaire? Something flickered across Adrian's face, something dark and complicated. Something like that. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving tonight. He glanced at his watch. It's late. Can I give you a ride home? Absolutely not. The words came out automatically. I don't know you. You could be a serial killer for all I know. Fair point. Adrian pulled out a business card. Thick, expensive cardstock with minimal text. Just a name and a phone number. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk about your future at Casa Verona. Or don't. Your choice. Isabella took the card, studying it in the dim light of the alley. The name meant nothing to her, but something about the weight of it in her hand felt significant. Why do you care? She asked. Really? Why does any of this matter to you? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, stripped of the confidence and control. My mother was a waitress, he said, in Florence before we moved to the States. She worked 16-hour shifts at a restaurant where the owner treated her like dirt, grabbed her, yelled at her, just like Ricci did to you. One night, he hit her. She quit, but the damage was done. She never quite trusted restaurants again. Never quite trusted men in power again. Isabella's throat tightened.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Just don't let men like Ricci make you small. He turned toward the SUV, then paused. And, Isabella? You were right to confront me. Most people are too afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. I need that around me. I wasn't trying to do you a favor. I know. That's what made it valuable. He walked to the SUV, his bodyguards opening the door in perfect synchronization. Before he got in, he looked back one more time. The offer stands. Tomorrow. Think about it. Then he was gone, the SUV disappearing into Chicago's late-night traffic, leaving Isabella standing in an alley holding a business card and wondering what the hell had just happened to her life. She looked down at the card again. Adrian Moretti. Why did that name sound familiar? Isabella didn't sleep that night. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning Adrian's business card over and over in her hands. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scene replaying, Ricci's hand to her hair, the wine spreading across the tablecloth, and those dark eyes watching from table 7. By 6 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. By 7, she was back at Casa Verona. The restaurant looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less magical. The windows she'd cleaned 1,000 times reflected the morning sun. The door she'd walked through for 3 years stood closed, a handwritten sign taped to the glass, closed for renovations. Renovations. Already. He actually did it, Isabella whispered. You didn't hear? She jumped. Carlos, one of the line cooks, was leaning against the building with a cigarette. He looked exhausted, his chef's whites rumpled like he'd slept in them. Hear what? Girl, where have you been? Carlos took a long drag. It's all anyone's been talking about. That guy from last night? He bought the whole place. Paid cash. The owners didn't even try to negotiate. They just took the money and ran. Isabella's stomach flipped. He really did it. That's not even the crazy part. Carlos lowered his voice, glancing around like the empty street might be listening. You know who he is, right? Adrian Moretti. He gave me his card. And the name doesn't ring any bells? When Isabella shook her head, Carlos's eyes widened.
Jesus, Isabella.
Adrian Moretti. As in the Moretti family. As in Chicago's most dangerous. He stopped himself, took another drag. You really don't know? A chill ran down Isabella's spine. Know what? Before Carlos could answer, Maria appeared in the doorway. The head hostess had been at Casa Verona longer than anyone, 15 years of seating guests and managing reservations. She looked pale, shaken. Isabella, thank God, Maria grabbed her arm. Come inside. We need to talk. All of us. Inside, the entire staff had gathered, waiters, cooks, dishwashers, even old Tony, who usually never left the kitchen. They were clustered around the bar, voices hushed, phones out. The energy felt wrong, almost funeral-like. What's going on? Isabella asked. We've been researching our new boss, said James, a waiter who'd been there almost as long as Maria. He turned his phone around, showing Isabella a news article. And we found some interesting information. The headline made Isabella's blood run cold. Moretti family patriarch dies in prison. End of a criminal empire. She grabbed the phone, scrolling through the article. The words jumped out at her in fragments. Organized crime. Racketeering. Violence. Money laundering. Chicago's underworld. 30-year sentence. And there, in a grainy photo from 15 years ago, was a younger Adrian Moretti standing beside a gray-haired man at some kind of formal dinner. His father was Vincent Moretti, Maria said quietly. One of the most powerful mob bosses in Chicago history. They controlled everything: gambling, construction, unions. The FBI spent 20 years trying to bring them down. But they did, James added. Big trial about 8 years ago. Vincent Moretti got life in prison. Died there 2 years ago. Heart attack. Isabella's hands trembled as she scrolled through more articles. There were photos of Adrian, younger, angrier, being led away by federal agents. Headlines screaming about trials and testimonies and plea deals. Adrian testified against his own father, Carlos said. That's how the feds finally got him. The son turned state's witness, gave them everything. Bank accounts, shell companies, the whole operation. He was never charged with anything himself, Maria pointed out. The articles say he was kept out of the family business. Vincent wanted him to go legitimate, get an MBA, clean up the family image. Adrian cooperated with the investigation in exchange for immunity. Still, James said darkly, you don't just walk away from a family like that. Once you're Moretti, you're always Moretti. Isabella felt dizzy. The man who'd defended her last night, who'd talked about his mother with such tenderness, who'd smiled that half-smile in the alley, he was the son of a mob boss. His father had died in prison for crimes that probably included murder.
There's more, Carlos said.
After the trial, Adrian disappeared, completely off the grid for like 5 years. No one knew where he went. Then, about 2 years ago, he resurfaced. Started investing in businesses around Chicago. Restaurants, mostly. Real estate. All legitimate, supposedly. But what? Isabella's voice came out hoarse. But the word on the street is that he's not just investing. Maria glanced toward the door, as if checking for eavesdroppers. People say he's rebuilding. Not the criminal empire, something different. Power through money instead of violence. Some people call him the legitimate prince. Others say he's even more dangerous than his father because you can't see him coming. And he bought this restaurant, Isabella said slowly. Because I yelled at my manager? No, James shook his head. That's what we've been trying to figure out. Adrian Moretti doesn't do anything randomly. If he bought Casa Verona, it's because it fits into something bigger. Maybe he's laundering money. Maybe he's using it as a front. Or maybe he just wanted to help someone, Isabella interrupted, surprising herself. She thought about the way Adrian had looked when he talked about his mother. The anger in his eyes when Ricci grabbed her hair. Maybe not everything is a conspiracy. The staff exchanged glances that clearly said they thought Isabella was being naive. Look, Maria said gently. We're all grateful you don't have to deal with Ricci anymore. And the new contract terms Adrian's lawyers sent over this morning are incredible. Better pay, health insurance, profit sharing. It's more than we ever dreamed of. But, Isabella, you need to be careful. A man like Adrian Moretti doesn't do favors without expecting something in return. Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Coffee? We should talk about Casa Verona's future. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to run, to forget last night ever happened, to find another restaurant and pretend Adrian Moretti didn't exist. But another part, the part that had confronted him in the alley, the part that was tired of being afraid, wanted answers. She typed back, "Where?" The response came immediately. "I'll send a car. Don't worry, I promise you'll make it home alive." Despite everything, Isabella smiled. At least he had a sense of humor about being dangerous. "I'm meeting him," she announced. The staff erupted in protests, but Isabella held up her hand. "He bought this place. He's our boss now. I need to know what he wants," she paused. "And, honestly, I need to know if you're all right. If the man who saved me last night is the monster everyone says he is." "What if he is?" Carlos asked quietly. Isabella picked up her jacket. "Then at least I'll know the truth." The car that arrived for Isabella was not what she expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious, a stretch limousine, maybe, or another black SUV with tinted windows. Instead, a simple silver Tesla pulled up, driven by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Isabella Conti?" the woman asked through the open window. "That's me."
I'm Margaret.
"I work for Mr. Moretti. Hop in, sweetheart. He's waiting at the cafe on Monroe Street." The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Through the window, Isabella could see Adrian sitting at a corner table, typing on a laptop. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater, no suit, no bodyguards visible. He looked almost normal. Almost. "Thank you for coming," he said when she approached, standing to pull out her chair. The gesture was old-fashioned, oddly courteous from a man whose father had ruled Chicago's underworld. Did I have a choice? Isabella sat, keeping her purse in her lap, her escape route mentally mapped. Yes, Adrian closed his laptop. You always have a choice, Isabella. That's important to me. I never want you to feel trapped. A barista brought over 2 espressos without Adrian ordering. He must be a regular here, Isabella realized. The thought was strange, imagining Adrian Moretti with regular habits, favorite coffee shops, a normal life. I know you've heard the stories by now, Adrian said, stirring sugar into his cup. About my family. About me. Are they true? Which parts? All of them, Isabella met his gaze. Was your father Vincent Moretti? Did he run organized crime in Chicago? Did you testify against him? Yes, and yes, Adrian didn't flinch. Anything else you want to know? His honesty surprised her. Why did you turn on your own father? Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost sad. Because I watched him destroy everything he touched. My mother died when I was 19, cancer that could have been treated if we'd caught it earlier, but she was too afraid to go to doctors. Too afraid they'd ask questions about bruises, about stress, about why a woman married to a wealthy man looked so haunted. He looked up. My father didn't hit her. He didn't have to. The fear did all the work. Isabella felt her throat tighten. After she died, I was supposed to take my place in the family business. Vincent had kept me clean, sent me to business school, kept my name off everything illegal. I was supposed to be the legitimate face of the Moretti empire. Adrian laughed bitterly. But I saw what that empire was built on. Broken families. Ruined businesses. People too terrified to fight back. I couldn't do it. So, you went to the FBI. I gave them everything. Bank accounts, names, operations. And yes, that included my father. He met her eyes. Do you think that makes me a hero or a traitor? I think it makes you human, Isabella said quietly. Something in Adrian's expression softened. Most people don't see it that way. In my father's world, family is everything. What I did was unforgivable. There are still people in Chicago who'd kill me for it if they thought they could get away with it. Then why come back? Why not stay disappeared? Because running away didn't work. Adrian leaned forward. I spent 5 years in Florence, trying to be someone else. I learned to cook in my grandmother's kitchen, worked in restaurants, tried to build a life that had nothing to do with Vincent Moretti. But everywhere I went, I was still his son, still carrying that weight. So I decided if I couldn't escape it, I'd use it. Use it how? By building something different. Something legitimate. Real businesses, real jobs, real value. His eyes lit up with passion. My father used fear to control people. I want to use opportunity. That's why I invest in restaurants, in small businesses. That's why I bought Casa Verona. Because you want to prove you're not your father, Isabella said. No, Adrian shook his head. Because I want to prove I'm better than him. And that's where you come in. Isabella tensed. What do you mean? Adrian slid a folder across the table. I'm offering you a position. Operations consultant for Casa Verona. You'd work directly with me to rebuild the restaurant. New menu, new management structure, new culture. Better than it was. Better than anything in Chicago. Isabella opened the folder, and her jaw dropped. The salary listed was 3 times what she'd been making. Health insurance, profit sharing, a signing bonus that would cover 6 months of rent. This is insane, she breathed. It's fair compensation for someone with your skills and insight. My skills. Isabella laughed. I'm a waitress. I spill wine on customers and get yelled at by managers. What skills could I possibly? You know that restaurant inside and out, Adrian interrupted. You know what works and what doesn't. You know what the staff needs, what the customers want. And more importantly, you had the courage to tell me I was wrong. Do you know how rare that is? Most people are too afraid of me to be honest. I need someone who isn't. Isabella stared at the contract. It was everything she'd ever wanted. Financial security, respect, a chance to actually build something instead of just serving it. But the price. What do you really want from me? She asked. I want you to help me prove that the Moretti name can mean something good. Adrian's voice was intense now, almost pleading. I want someone who'll call me out when I'm being an arrogant ass. I want a partner who sees possibilities, not just problems. And yes, I want someone who reminds me why I'm doing this in the first place. I'm not your redemption story. I'm not asking you to be, he leaned back. I'm asking you to be excellent at your job, to push back when I'm wrong, to help build something worth being proud of. Everything else, the philosophy, the meaning, that's my problem, not yours. Isabella looked at the contract again. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note. You treat me as an equal, or this doesn't work. I see. She looked up sharply. Did you write this? I figured you'd want that in writing, Adrian smiled. Well, do we have a deal? Every logical part of Isabella's brain screamed to her to walk away. Adrian Moretti was dangerous, complicated, dragging a legacy of violence behind him like chains. Getting involved with him, even professionally, was asking for trouble. But she thought about Ricci's hand in her hair, about 3 years of scraping by on tips and dealing with abuse, about the way Adrian had stood up for her when no one else would. And she thought about the passion in his voice when he talked about building something better. I have one condition, she said. Name it. You treat me as an equal, not as a project, not as a statement, not as proof of your redemption. If this is going to work, it's because we're partners. Real partners. Adrian extended his hand across the table. That's exactly why I chose you. Isabella took his hand, sealing a deal that would change everything. When do I start? Right now. Adrian grinned, a real smile this time, not the careful half-smile from before. We have a restaurant to rebuild. And trust me, Isabella Conti, you're going to love what we're about to create. She believed him. God help her, she actually believed him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of sawdust, paint samples, and arguments. Absolutely not, Isabella said, holding up the menu proposal. Truffle oil on everything? This isn't 2015, Adrian. People want honest food, not pretentious garbage. Adrian looked up from the floor plans spread across what used to be Casa Verona's dining room. Construction workers moved around them, tearing out old booths and refinishing the hardwood floors. It's a classic flavor profile, he protested. It's lazy. Isabella circled 3 items with a red pen. If you want to honor your Italian heritage, let's do it right. Real ingredients, simple preparations. Your grandmother didn't use truffle oil, did she? A smile tugged at Adrian's mouth. She'd have thrown it at my head. Smart woman, Isabella tossed the menu back to him. Try again. It became their rhythm. Adrian would propose something, usually too expensive, too complicated, or too influenced by whatever food trend he'd read about. Isabella would shoot it down, and they'd argue until they found something better. The staff watched these exchanges with barely concealed amusement. They fight like an old married couple, Carlos whispered to Maria as Adrian and Isabella debated tile choices for the 3rd time that day. Except married couples eventually agree on something, Maria whispered back. But they were wrong. Beneath the arguments, Adrian and Isabella were building something remarkable. The new Casa Verona, they decided to keep the name, was taking shape as a blend of old-world elegance and modern comfort. Adrian's eye for design and Isabella's practical knowledge of how a restaurant actually worked created something neither could have achieved alone. The late nights started in the 2nd week. Go home, Adrian said one evening, finding Isabella still at the restaurant at 11 p.m., reviewing supplier contracts. I will. Just finishing these. Isabella, you've been here since 7 this morning. So have you. He couldn't argue with that. Instead, he went to the kitchen, the only part of the restaurant still functional, and came back 15 minutes later with 2 plates of pasta. You cooked. Isabella stared at the cacio e pepe like it might be poisoned. My grandmother's recipe. I told you I spent time in her kitchen. Adrian sat across from her, twirling pasta on his fork.
Eat.
You can't rebuild a restaurant on coffee and stubbornness alone. Isabella took a bite and nearly moaned. The pasta was perfect, silky, rich, with just the right amount of black pepper bite. This is incredible. My grandmother believed good food was medicine. For the body and the soul. Adrian watched her eat with an expression she couldn't quite read. She used to say that cooking for someone was the most honest thing you could do. You can't fake it. Either you care enough to do it right, or you don't. Did you cook for your father? The question slipped out before Isabella could stop it. They'd avoided talking about Vincent Moretti since that first conversation at the cafe. Once, Adrian said quietly, when I came back from business school, I made him dinner, everything my grandmother taught me. I thought maybe if I showed him I could create something beautiful, something that didn't hurt people, he'd understand why I couldn't join the family business. What did he say? He said cooking was for women and servants. That I was wasting my education. Adrian set down his fork. 3 months later, I went to the FBI. Isabella reached across the table, her hand covering his. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. The gesture just felt right. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. It led me here, his hand turned under hers, their fingers intertwining. To this restaurant. To this moment. The air between them changed. Charged. Isabella became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how his thumb was tracing small circles on her palm, how his dark eyes seemed to see straight through her. She pulled her hand back. We should finish eating. Right? Adrian cleared his throat. Of course, but something had shifted. The next night, Isabella burned her hand on a hot pan while testing recipes in the kitchen. Damn it! She dropped the pan, tears springing to her eyes. Adrian was beside her in seconds. Let me see. It's fine, Isabella, his voice was firm but gentle. Let me see. She held out her hand. The burn wasn't terrible, red and angry, but not blistering. Adrian led her to the sink, running cool water over it with a tenderness that made her chest ache. You need to be more careful, he murmured, examining the burn. I know how to handle a kitchen. I know. But I'd prefer if you kept all your fingers. He found the first aid kit, pulling out burn cream and gauze. Hold still. His fingers were gentle as he bandaged her hand, his head bent in concentration. Isabella watched him work, noticing details she'd tried to ignore before. The way his hair fell forward, the strong line of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Where'd you get that scar? She asked. Adrian touched his eyebrow reflexively. Bar fight. I was 22, drunk, and stupid. Told some guy he was wrong about the best pizza in Chicago. Isabella laughed. You got into a fight over pizza? It was Giordano's versus Lou Malnati's. These things matter. He finished tying off the bandage. There. Good as new. But he didn't let go of her hand. They stood there, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, neither moving, neither breathing. Adrian, Isabella whispered. I know, his voice was rough. This is complicated. You're my boss. Technically, we're partners. You're Vincent Moretti's son. I can't change that. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But I can choose who I am now. Who I want to be. And who's that? Someone worthy of the way you look at me. He stepped closer. Someone who doesn't screw this up. Isabella's heart hammered. Screw what up? This. Us. Whatever this is becoming. She should step back. Should put professional distance between them. Should remember that Adrian Moretti was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his family name and everything to do with the way he made her feel. Instead, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you. For the bandage. She left him standing in the kitchen, but she could feel his eyes on her all the way to the door. That night, alone in her apartment, Isabella touched her bandaged hand and smiled. This was definitely complicated. But maybe, just maybe, complicated was exactly what she needed. We need to go to Siena, Adrian announced 3 days later, walking into the restaurant with 2 plane tickets. Isabella looked up from the wine list she was curating. Excuse me? There's a culinary festival. 3 days. The best artisan producers in Tuscany, olive oil, cheese, wine, pasta makers. If we're going to make Casa Verona authentic, we need authentic partnerships. He slid a ticket across the table. We leave tomorrow. Tomorrow? Isabella's voice rose. Adrian, I can't just drop everything and fly to Italy. We have the grand opening in 3 weeks. The staff training starts Monday. The liquor license still hasn't. Margaret's handling the license. Carlos can run the training. He knows the menu as well as we do. And the opening will be better if we have real Italian ingredients, not the commercial stuff we can get in Chicago. Adrian leaned against the table. Besides, when's the last time you took a vacation? I don't take vacations. I work. Exactly my point. He pushed the ticket closer. 3 days, Isabella. Think of it as research. Business expenses, separate hotel rooms, completely professional. The way he said completely professional made her think he was trying to convince himself as much as her. This is insane, she said, even as she picked up the ticket. That seems to be my specialty. Siena in September was golden. Isabella had never been to Italy, never been anywhere really. Her parents had immigrated from Italy to Chicago before she was born, but they'd never had money to visit. Standing in the Piazza del Campo, surrounded by medieval buildings and the smell of espresso, she felt something unlock in her chest. It's beautiful, she breathed. Adrian stood beside her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. My grandmother brought me here when I was 10. She said Siena was where Tuscany kept its heart. He pointed toward the Duomo.
Come on.
The festival starts in an hour, but I want to show you something first. They walked through narrow streets that wound like secrets, past shops selling hand-painted ceramics and leather goods. Adrian moved through the city like he belonged here, greeting shopkeepers in fluid Italian, navigating the maze of alleys without hesitation. He stopped at a small trattoria tucked into a corner. This is where my grandmother worked before she moved to America. The owner's grandson runs it now. An elderly man emerged, his face lighting up when he saw Adrian. They embraced, rapid Italian flowing between them. Then the old man turned to Isabella, taking her hands. Bella, Bella, he said, winking at Adrian.
Finalmente, una ragazza intelligente.
Isabella looked at Adrian. What did he say? He said you're smart. Adrian's ears were slightly red. He's making assumptions. What kind of assumptions? The kind Italian grandmothers and their friends always make. Adrian cleared his throat. Come on. The festival. The festival was overwhelming in the best way. Endless stalls of olive oil for tasting, wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano being cracked open, wine flowing freely. Isabella took notes furiously while Adrian negotiated with producers, his Italian smooth and confident. You're different here, she observed as they walked between stalls, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Different how? Lighter. Like you're not carrying as much weight. She sampled a piece of prosciutto a vendor offered. In Chicago, you're always aware of who's watching, who's judging. Here, you're just you. Adrian was quiet for a moment. That's because Chicago knows Vincent Moretti. Siena only knows Adrian. He stopped walking, turning to face her. That's why I came back here after the trial. To remember who I was before I became my father's son.
And did you?
Remember? I started to. His eyes held hers. And I'm remembering more now. Isabella's breath caught. They were standing in the middle of a crowded festival, surrounded by noise and laughter, but it felt like they were completely alone. Adrian, try this. A vendor interrupted, thrusting glasses of wine at them.
Brunello di Montalcino.
The best in Tuscany. The moment broke. Isabella laughed, taking the glass. To research. To research, Adrian agreed, but his eyes said something different. They had dinner at a small restaurant outside the city walls, overlooking the Tuscan countryside. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. Where are you really running from? Isabella asked, emboldened by wine and the distance from Chicago. Adrian swirled his wine, considering. That's not quite the right question. Then what is? What am I running toward? He set down his glass. For years, I thought I was running from my father's legacy. From the violence, the fear, the darkness. But that's not it. I'm running toward something my father never could, peace. A life built on creation instead of destruction. That's a beautiful goal, Isabella said softly. It's also exhausting. Adrian's voice was raw. Every day in Chicago, I feel people watching, waiting for me to become him, to slip back into that world. Some days, I'm so tired of fighting against expectations that I wonder if it wouldn't be easier to just give in. But you don't.
No.
Because that would mean he won. Adrian looked at her, and in the fading light, he looked younger, vulnerable. And because now I have something worth fighting for. The restaurant. More than that, he reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. A reason to be better than I was yesterday. Isabella's heart raced. Adrian, we work together. This could complicate. I know he didn't let go of her hand. I've been telling myself that for 2 weeks. Stay professional.
Keep distance.
Don't make things messy. But Isabella, I'm tired of running from things that scare me. And you terrify me.
Why?
Because you make me want things I didn't think I deserved. A real partnership.
Trust.
Something that isn't built on fear or power or legacy. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You make me want to be someone worth knowing. You already are, Isabella whispered. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Then Adrian stood, coming around to her side of the table. He offered his hand. Walk with me? They walked through the Tuscan evening, through olive groves and past stone farmhouses, not talking, just existing together. When they reached a small overlook, Adrian stopped. I don't want to screw this up, he said quietly. Then don't, Isabella turned to face him. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. Don't. He kissed her. Soft, tentative, asking permission with every second. Isabella's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as hers. The Tuscan sunset painted them gold, two people trying to become something better than their pasts. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Still complicated, he murmured. Absolutely, Isabella breathed. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it is. They stood there as the sun set completely, holding each other, neither one running anymore. The flight back to Chicago felt too short. Isabella and Adrian spent it planning the menu, reviewing contracts, maintaining the careful professional distance they'd agreed upon. But every accidental touch, hands brushing over papers, shoulders bumping in the cramped airline seats, reminded them of Siena, of sunset and promises and a kiss that had changed everything. We should talk about it, Isabella said as they waited for their luggage. About what? Adrian's tone was carefully neutral, but his hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. About what happens now. In Chicago. Now, we open the best restaurant the city has ever seen. He grabbed their bags. Everything else, we figure out as we go. It should have felt uncertain. Instead, it felt like possibility. Casa Verona was beautiful. The renovations had finished while they were gone. Margaret had overseen everything. The new bar with its marble top, the open kitchen design, the warm lighting that made everything glow. The staff had completed training. The opening was set for Friday night, just 4 days away. It's perfect, Isabella breathed, walking through the transformed space. It's not just mine anymore, Adrian said, standing beside her. It's ours. The word hung between them, ours. A restaurant. A partnership. Maybe something more. Isabella's phone buzzed. Then Adrian's. Then both again. That's weird, Isabella muttered, checking the screen. It was a news alert. Fire at Moretti-owned property in River North. Adrian's face went pale. That's the wine bar I bought last year. More alerts. Another fire. This time at a cafe in Lincoln Park. Then a text message to Adrian's phone from an unknown number. He showed it to Isabella, his jaw tight. Florence remembers its king. Step aside or burn. Florence. Isabella's stomach dropped. But your father's organization was dismantled. The FBI took out the leadership. But foot soldiers don't just disappear. Adrian was already making calls. They regroup. They wait. And apparently, they're tired of waiting. Within an hour, they learned the extent of it. 3 properties damaged. 1 employee injured. Not seriously, but enough to send a message. And more texts, all saying the same thing. Adrian had betrayed his father, and now Chicago's underworld wanted him gone. "We need to close the restaurant," Isabella said. "At least until—" "No," Adrian's voice was steel. "That's exactly what they want. They want me to run, to hide, to prove I'm weak. Adrian, this isn't about ego. People could get hurt. People are already hurt." He slammed his hand on the bar. "Don't you see? If I back down now, it never stops. They'll keep burning, keep threatening, keep taking until there's nothing left." Isabella grabbed his arm. "Then what do we do?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he looked at her, the mask had dropped completely. This wasn't the smooth investor or the reformed son. This was something harder, something forged in a world Isabella had only read about. "I handle it," he said. "My way." The next day, Adrian disappeared. Isabella tried calling, texting, even going to his penthouse apartment. Nothing. Margaret would only say, "He's taking care of business. Give him time." But the restaurant still needed to open. Isabella threw herself into preparations, working 18-hour days, trying not to think about where Adrian was or what taking care of business meant. On the third day, Marco arrived. Isabella knew him from photos, Adrian's oldest friend, the one who'd stood by him during the trial. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that had seen too much. "You're Isabella," he said. It wasn't a question. "Where's Adrian?" "Working. He asked me to check on you. Make sure you're safe." "Safe from what?" Marco's expression was grim. "From the consequences of being connected to him." He showed her a file, surveillance photos of her apartment building, her routes to work, even photos of her with Adrian in Siena. Someone had been watching them for weeks. "These are Sal Romano's people," Marco explained. "He was Vincent's underboss. Did 10 years, got out last month. He's been consolidating what's left of the old crew, and he sees Adrian as a traitor who needs to be dealt with." Isabella's blood ran cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Adrian's about to go to war, and he's trying to keep you out of it. But you should know what you're in the middle of." Marco leaned against the bar. "He's different with you.
Softer.
And that makes you a target. Then we go to the police. The FBI. We have—" Marco's smile was bitter. "Adrian's been working with federal prosecutors all day. But legal channels take time. And Romano won't wait. So, what is Adrian doing? What he swore he'd never do again. Playing the game his father taught him." Adrian returned that night. Isabella was alone in the restaurant, going over final details for the opening, when she heard the door. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled, shadows under his eyes, that dangerous edge back in full force. "You should have told me," she said quietly. "Told you what? That getting close to me puts a target on your back." He poured himself a drink from behind the bar. I knew from the moment I defended you that night that this could happen. And I did it anyway because I'm selfish." "You're not selfish. I'm my father's son." Adrian's voice was hard. "You want to know what I've been doing for 3 days? I've been systematically destroying Romano's operation. Not with bullets or bombs. I promised myself I'd never go back to that. But with money, with lawyers, with pressure on the right people. I've frozen his accounts, gotten his properties seized for tax violations, turned 3 of his lieutenants into federal witnesses."
He drained the glass.
"I've been using every dirty trick my father ever taught me. The only difference is I'm doing it legally. Barely." Isabella walked to him, taking the glass from his hand. "Did it work?"
"For now."
"Romano's operation is crippled. He can't move money, can't operate. His crew is scattering." Adrian's laugh was hollow. "Congratulations. You're in business with Chicago's most dangerous legitimate businessman." "Stop," Isabella grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Stop apologizing for being good at something your father taught you. You used those skills to protect people, to protect me. That doesn't make you him. You don't know what I'm capable of." "Then show me." She didn't let go. "Show me the worst of you, Adrian." Show me the darkness you're so afraid of. Because I've seen the best, and I'm not going anywhere. Something in Adrian's expression cracked. He pulled her close, his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway, she kissed him. Hard, fierce, claiming. We open in 2 days. And Romano or not, Chicago or not, we're doing this together. Together, Adrian repeated, like he was testing the word. Partners, remember? For the first time in 3 days, Adrian smiled. Partners. Outside, Chicago glittered with 1,000 lights. And somewhere in those shadows, Sal Romano watched and waited. But inside Casa Verona, 2 people held each other and pretended, just for a moment, that the world was only as big as the space between them. Opening night arrived with the weight of a storm about to break.
Casa Verona gleamed.
Every table was booked. Food critics, influencers, old Chicago money, and people who just wanted to see what the son of Vincent Moretti had created. The kitchen hummed with controlled chaos. The staff moved like dancers in perfectly choreographed positions. Isabella stood at the hostess stand in a black dress Adrian had insisted on buying her in Siena, watching the dining room fill. She looked beautiful and terrified. Breathe, Adrian murmured, appearing beside her in a perfectly tailored navy suit. We've got this. Do we? She kept her voice low. Marco told me Romano's been quiet. Too quiet. I know. Adrian's hand found hers behind the podium where no one could see. But we don't let fear win. Not tonight. The first hour went flawlessly. The cacio e pepe, Adrian's grandmother's recipe, drew actual gasps. The wine pairings Isabella had curated in Siena were perfect. A food critic from the Tribune whispered to her assistant that this might be the best Italian meal she'd had outside of Italy. Then, at 8:30, the door opened and Sal Romano walked in. Isabella recognized him from the photos Marco had shown her. 60 years old, gray hair slicked back, a face carved from granite and violence. He wasn't alone, for men flanked him, all wearing suits that didn't quite hide their bulk. The restaurant's energy shifted. Conversations died. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade. Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between Romano and Isabella. We're fully booked tonight. I'm sure you can find room for an old friend. Romano's voice was sandpaper and smoke. We have so much to discuss. About your father. About loyalty. About Chicago. There's nothing to discuss.
No.
Romano smiled, showing too many teeth. Not even about the federal investigation into my businesses? The one that coincidentally started 3 days ago? With sealed evidence that only someone with intimate knowledge of old Moretti operations could provide. Adrian's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar, Romano took a step closer. His men tensed. You're just like Vincent, always thinking you're smarter than everyone else. But at least your father had the balls to do his own dirty work. My father, Adrian said quietly, dangerously, died in a cage. If you want to follow him there, keep talking. The threat hung in the air. Isabella's heart hammered. She could see Marco and 2 other security personnel moving closer through the crowd, trying to look casual.
Romano laughed.
You think you can threaten me, boy? I was breaking bones for your father when you were still in diapers. You might wear nice suits and buy restaurants, but you're still Moretti. Still a criminal pretending to be legitimate. The only difference between us, Adrian said, his voice carrying through the silent restaurant, is that I learned legitimacy is a better weapon than violence. You burn my properties? I freeze your accounts. You threaten my people? I turn yours into witnesses. You want a war? I'll bury you with paperwork and prosecutions so deep you'll wish you were in the same cell as my father. Tough words. Romano's hand moved toward his jacket. Everything happened at once. Marco was there, gripping Romano's wrist. The other security personnel surrounded Romano's men. Adrian didn't move, didn't even flinch. You're not going to shoot me, Adrian said calmly. Not here, not in front of 50 witnesses, not with federal agents probably outside right now because you're stupid enough to violate your parole by coming within 100 feet of me. Romano's face went purple. You set me up. I gave you rope. You hanged yourself. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing Romano the screen. It was a live feed, federal agents outside, watching the restaurant. The moment you walked through that door, you violated the restraining order my lawyers filed yesterday. You're going back to prison, Sal. Not because I'm violent like my father, because I'm smarter. For the first time, Romano looked uncertain, then afraid. Take him, Adrian said. Marco and his team escorted Romano and his men out. Through the windows, Isabella watched federal agents move in, making arrests. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. The restaurant remained frozen in silence. Then Adrian turned to the dining room, his composure perfect, and said, I apologize for the interruption. Tonight's desserts are on the house. Please enjoy your meals. Like a spell-breaking, conversation resumed. The kitchen started moving again. Someone laughed nervously. A critic took another bite of pasta and made notes. But Isabella saw what others didn't. The tremor in Adrian's hands as he straightened his cuffs, the way his jaw clenched, the storm behind his carefully controlled expression. She followed him to his office in the back. The moment the door closed, Adrian slumped against it. I planned that, he said hoarsely. All of it. I knew Romano would come. I knew he couldn't resist confronting me. And I used his pride, his anger, to put him back in prison. You protected everyone here. I manipulated him. Adrian looked at her with haunted eyes. Just like my father would have. The only difference is I used lawyers instead of guns. But the calculation? The coldness? That was all Vincent Moretti. Isabella crossed to him, taking his face in her hands.
No.
Your father would have had Romano killed. You had him arrested. Your father ruled through fear. You just showed an entire restaurant, an entire city, that you can defend yourself without violence. That's not Vincent. That's you. You sound so certain. I am certain, she kissed him softly. Because Vincent Moretti would never have opened a restaurant, would never have learned to cook, would never have stood up for a waitress being abused by her boss. You're not your father, Adrian. You're the man who chose a different path. Adrian pulled her close, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. What if I make the wrong choice? What if one day I wake up and I am him? Then I'll be there to remind you who you really are. Isabella pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. That's what partners do. A knock on the door. Marco stuck his head in. Romano's in custody. Federal agents want a statement, but they said it can wait until tomorrow. And boss, the dining room is applauding. Adrian blinked. What? They went back to the dining room. The guests were standing, clapping. Not for the drama, for the food, the ambience, the courage it took to face down the past and keep serving excellent pasta. Adrian took Isabella's hand and squeezed it tight. Together, he whispered. Together, she confirmed. And for the first time since he'd returned to Chicago, Adrian Moretti smiled like he believed he might actually deserve peace. 3 weeks after Romano's arrest, Adrian drove Isabella to the countryside. Casa Verona had become the hottest reservation in Chicago. Reviews called it transformative, a love letter to Italian cuisine, proof that redemption is possible. Isabella had been interviewed by food magazines. Adrian had been profiled in business journals. They were successful beyond their wildest dreams. But success came with scrutiny. Cameras followed them. Gossip sites speculated about their relationship. Every decision was analyzed, every move questioned. Chicago was watching, waiting to see if the reformed Moretti would stumble. Where are we going? Isabella asked as city gave way to farmland. Somewhere no one's watching, Adrian said. The villa appeared after an hour of driving, a stone farmhouse on 20 acres, surrounded by overgrown gardens and wild grass. It was beautiful in a forgotten way, like something from a dream. My grandmother's house, Adrian said, helping Isabella out of the car. After she died, my father kept it but never came here. Too many memories of her, I think. After he went to prison, it just sat empty. They walked through rooms thick with dust and silence. The kitchen still had her pots hanging on hooks. The garden still had her rosemary growing wild. The bedroom still had her portrait on the wall, a young woman with dark hair and eyes that looked like Adrian's. "She would have loved you," Adrian said, standing in the doorway. "She always said I needed someone who wouldn't be afraid to tell me when I was being an idiot." Smart woman Isabella touched the portrait gently. "Why didn't you sell this place?" "Because it's the only piece of my family that doesn't carry violence. This house was joy,
Safety.
love." He moved to the window, looking out at the overgrown fields. "I used to come here as a kid and pretend I lived in a different family. One where dinner wasn't interrupted by business calls, where my father smiled instead of calculated." Isabella came to stand beside him. "You could restore it. Make it what you remember." "I've been thinking about that." Adrian turned to face her. "Actually, I've been thinking about a lot of things these last few weeks." Something in his tone made Isabella's heart skip. "What things?" "About how every night for the past 6 months, I've planned my exit strategy. Where I'd go if Chicago turned on me. What I'd do if the past caught up. How I'd leave without causing too much damage." His hand found hers. "Then you walked into my life, and you started building something I actually wanted to stay for." "Adrian, I'm in love with you," he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed, like he'd never said them before. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know you signed on to rebuild a restaurant, not to deal with federal investigations and mob threats and a partner with enough baggage to fill a cargo plane. But I can't keep pretending this is just professional. Can't keep pretending I don't think about you every second of every day." Isabella's throat tightened. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't noticed how you always make sure I eat dinner? How you stand between me and the door whenever someone enters? How you look at me like I'm something precious instead of just your business partner? Then why haven't we talked about it? Because talking about it makes it real. And real means it can break." Isabella turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "Everything in my life before you was safe and small. Terrible tips, angry managers, but predictable. Then you happened, and suddenly I'm flying to Italy and opening restaurants and falling in love with someone who has entire federal task forces investigating his past." "You're in love with me?" Adrian's voice was soft with wonder. Isabella laughed wetly. "Of course I am, you idiot. I've been in love with you since Siena. Maybe even before, since that first night when you bandaged my hand and looked at me like I mattered." Adrian crossed to her in 3 strides, turning her to face him. "You do matter. You're the only thing that matters." "That's not true. The restaurant matters. Your redemption matters. Your grandmother's memory matters. All of that matters because you make me want to be worthy of it." His hands cupped her face. "Before you, I was just going through motions, building businesses because it was better than the alternative. But you make me want to actually live, Isabella. Want to create things that last. Want to be someone who deserves a future. You already are that person. Then stay with me." It wasn't quite a question, but not quite a statement. "Not just at the restaurant. Not just as partners. Stay with me here, in all the messy, complicated, beautiful ways 2 people can be together." Isabella kissed him, long and deep and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise that when things get hard, and they will get hard, you won't run. You won't decide I'm better off without you and disappear into some noble sacrifice. You stay, and we fight through it together." Adrian's thumb wiped away her tears. "I spent my whole life running. From my father, from Chicago, from anything that might hurt me. But with you, I want to plant roots so deep nothing could pull me away." They stood in his grandmother's house, holding each other while afternoon light painted everything gold. Outside, the overgrown garden waited to be tended. The fields waited to be planted. The house waited to be filled with life again. "We could open a second location," Isabella said suddenly.
Here.
"Something smaller, more intimate. A place where people come to escape the city." Adrian pulled back to look at her. "You'd want that. I want to build a life with you, Adrian. Not just a business. A real life. And this place. She gestured to the house, the land, the possibility of it all. This could be our beginning. Our proof that good things can grow from broken ground. Moretti's table, Adrian said softly. What? That's what we'll call it. A table where everyone's welcome. Where the name Moretti means community instead of crime. He smiled. That real smile that made him look younger, lighter. Where I can cook my grandmother's recipes and you can create magic and we can prove that second chances are real. Together? Always together. They kissed again, sealing a promise that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with hope. The press event was Isabella's idea. Casa Verona's been open for 2 months, she'd argued. We need to capitalize on the momentum. Show Chicago that we're not just a flash in the pan. So they planned an evening showcase, local food writers, lifestyle bloggers, a photographer from Bon Appetit. A celebration of their success, and an announcement about Moretti's table, the countryside location they'd been quietly developing. The restaurant gleamed. Staff circulated with champagne and small plates. Adrian gave a speech about second chances and community that had several journalists actually tearing up. Isabella stood beside him, proud and terrified in equal measure. Then she saw Ricci. He was at the back of the crowd, half hidden behind a reporter. Thinner than she remembered, his face haggard, his clothes wrinkled. But his eyes burned with something dark and desperate. Isabella's breath caught. She touched Adrian's arm, nodding toward the back. Adrian's expression hardened. He signaled Marco with a subtle gesture, but continued his speech without missing a beat. Marco began moving through the crowd, casual but purposeful. Ricci saw them noticing, and he ran. Not toward the exit, toward the kitchen. Everybody stay calm, Adrian said into the microphone, his voice steady even as Isabella saw the tension in his shoulders. We're going to take a brief intermission. Please enjoy the appetizers. We'll be right back. He handed the microphone to a confused staffer and moved quickly toward the kitchen, Isabella right behind him. Adrian, wait, she started. Stay here. Please. Absolutely not, she grabbed his hand. Partners, remember? They pushed through the kitchen doors together. The staff had scattered, sensing danger. Pots bubbled unattended. And there, near the back door, stood Marco Ricci with a gun. Isabella's blood turned to ice. You ruined my life, Ricci said. His voice shook. The gun shook. Everything about him screamed unstable. I can't get work anywhere. My wife left me. My kids won't return my calls. All because you had to play hero. Put the gun down, Marco, Adrian said, his voice calm.
Too calm.
The voice of someone who'd faced guns before. This isn't the answer. You don't get to tell me what the answer is. Ricci's face was red, tears streaming. You rich bastards, you think you can just destroy people's lives and walk away. You think money fixes everything. But you took everything from me. You took it from yourself, Isabella said before she could stop herself. The moment you put your hands on me. The moment you chose violence over decency. Shut up. Ricci swung the gun toward her. Adrian moved, fast, instinctive, putting himself between Isabella and the barrel. You want to blame someone? Blame me. I'm the one who bought the restaurant. I'm the one who had you fired. Isabella was just doing her job. She turned you against me. I saw how you looked at her that night. Like she was worth something, and I was trash. You were abusing your staff, Adrian said. That made you trash all on your own. Marco appeared in the doorway behind Ricci, silent as a ghost. He caught Adrian's eye, signaling, ready to move, waiting for the right moment. But Adrian shook his head slightly. Not yet. Why are you here, Ricci? Adrian asked. Really? You want money? I'll write you a check right now. You want an apology?
Fine.
I'm sorry your life fell apart. I'm sorry you're hurting. But pointing a gun at us won't fix anything. I don't want your money. Ricci's hand trembled violently. I want you to feel what I felt. Helpless. Humiliated. Destroyed. Then pull the trigger, Adrian said quietly. Adrian, no. Isabella grabbed his arm. but he didn't move. I mean it. If killing me will make you feel better, do it. But then what? You go to prison forever. Your kids really do lose their father. Your wife moves on. And I'm still dead, which doesn't bring back anything you lost. Ricci was crying openly now. I just wanted them to see. All those reporters out there. I wanted them to see what you really are. A criminal. A Moretti. You act like you're better than your father, but you destroyed my life just as completely as he destroyed everyone he touched. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. Isabella felt him tense beside her. You're right, Adrian said, and Isabella's head snapped toward him in shock. Not about everything, but about some of it. I did destroy your life. Maybe I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have given you a second chance instead of just throwing you out. Maybe I was so focused on proving I wasn't my father that I acted exactly like him. Decisive, final, no room for redemption. He took a step forward. The gun rose higher. But here's the difference between me and Vincent Moretti, Adrian continued. My father would have had you killed for touching his property. I just fired you. My father would have made sure you never worked again, anywhere, in any capacity. I just didn't rehire you. And right now? My father would have let Marco put a bullet in your back the second you walked in here. Adrian gestured to Marco, who stood frozen in the doorway. But I'm not doing that. Because you're not evil, Ricci. You're just broken and angry and desperate. And I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to be the son of a monster, and wonder if you're a monster too. I know what it's like to hurt people and not know how to fix it. He held out his hand. Give me the gun. Let me help you. Real help, not money, not charity. A second chance. Because if I believe in redemption for myself, I have to believe in it for you too. The kitchen was silent except for the bubbling pots. Isabella held her breath. Ricci looked at Adrian's outstretched hand. At the gun. At his own reflection in the stainless steel counter. Desperate, pathetic, lost. I don't deserve it, he whispered. Neither do I, Adrian said. But we get to try anyway. That's what second chances mean. Slowly, so slowly, Ricci lowered the gun. Adrian stepped forward and took it, ejecting the magazine with practiced efficiency. He handed it to Marco, without looking away from Ricci. You think power is fear, Adrian said softly. But I learned something my father never understood. Real power is forgiveness. The strength to show mercy when you could show violence. Ricci collapsed, sobbing. Adrian caught him, holding him up like a father would hold a son. I've got you, Adrian murmured. You're going to be okay. We're going to get you help. Real help. Isabella watched, tears streaming down her face, as Adrian Moretti, son of Chicago's most violent crime boss, chose compassion over revenge. And in that moment, she knew without question that she would love this man for the rest of her life. 6 months later, Casa Verona reopened under its new name, Taste of Fire. The rebrand had been Isabella's idea. We've been through fire, literal and metaphorical, she'd said. Let's own it. Let's show Chicago that fire doesn't just destroy. It transforms. The name resonated. Critics loved the symbolism. The menu reflected it too. Wood-fired pizzas, flame-roasted vegetables, dishes that embraced heat and transformation. Adrian had added his grandmother's recipes, each one a small rebellion against his father's legacy. The night of the grand reopening, Isabella stood at the entrance in a deep red dress, greeting guests with a confidence she'd never imagined possessing 6 months ago. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was co-owner, operations director, the heart of Taste of Fire. Nervous, Adrian appeared beside her, looking devastating in a black suit. Terrified, she admitted. What if people don't? They will, he squeezed her hand quickly, privately. Because we built something real. Something that matters. He was right. The restaurant was packed. Every table filled with people who'd been waiting months for this moment. The wine Isabella had sourced from Siena flowed freely. The kitchen moved like a symphony. Even old Tony, who never smiled, was grinning as he plated dishes. Chicago Tribune's food critic approached them during the appetizer course. "This is remarkable," she said, gesturing to her plate of burrata with fire-roasted tomatoes. "But I have to ask, how do you respond to people who say this is just good PR? That you're using a restaurant to rehabilitate the Moretti name?" Adrian opened his mouth, but Isabella spoke first. "I'd say they're half right," she said, and felt Adrian's surprised glance. "This absolutely rehabilitates the Moretti name, but not through PR, through action. Every person working here has healthcare, fair wages, and profit sharing. Every ingredient is sourced ethically from suppliers we pay on time. Every decision we make asks, does this create value or does it extract it?" She looked at Adrian. Adrian could have opened a restaurant anywhere, could have hidden behind a corporate structure, kept his name off the door. Instead, he put his family name on something that builds up instead of tears down. That's not PR. That's purpose. The critic scribbled notes, nodding. "And you? How do you respond to speculation about your relationship with Mr. Moretti? Some say it's a conflict of interest mixing business with love." Isabella finished. "I'd say that love is exactly what makes this work. We challenge each other. We push each other to be better. And yes, sometimes we argue about whether truffle oil has any place in modern cuisine." "It doesn't," Adrian interjected. "But those arguments make us stronger. Both the relationship and the business," Isabella smiled. "Besides, if we can survive federal investigations, mob threats, and an armed confrontation in our kitchen, I think we can handle running a restaurant together." The critic laughed. "You might be the most honest restaurateur I've ever interviewed." After she left, Adrian pulled Isabella aside into the quiet of his office. "That was amazing," he said. "The way you handled her questions, the way you defended." "Us," Isabella finished. "I defended us, Adrian, because I'm tired of apologizing for loving you. Tired of treating our relationship like it's something scandalous instead of something beautiful. I know. I just worry about the scrutiny it brings you. The way people look at you differently because you're with me." "Let them look," she moved closer. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "I see the man who cooks his grandmother's recipes at 2 in the morning when he can't sleep. I see the man who insisted we hire Marco Ricci's cousin when no one else would give her a chance. I see the man who cried when we got our first perfect review because it meant your mother would have been proud." Her hand found his cheek. "I see the man I love. Everything else is just noise." Adrian kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. When they pulled apart, he reached into his pocket. "I was going to wait," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "Maybe do something elaborate, romantic. But Isabella Connie, you make me want to stop planning and just live." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a band made of melted silver. "My father's cufflinks," Adrian explained. "The only thing of his I kept. I had them melted down and remade into something new. Something that represents transformation instead of legacy." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. "My past built this," Adrian continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Every hard lesson, every mistake, every moment of darkness led me to you. But our love will rebuild me. Will keep rebuilding me every day. So, Isabella, will you?" "Yes," she didn't let him finish. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They kissed again, and through the office window, they could see the dining room, full of life and laughter and people enjoying food made with love. They could see their staff working together seamlessly. They could see the city lights of Chicago twinkling beyond the windows. "We did it," Isabella whispered. "We actually built something that matters." "We're not done yet," Adrian pulled her close. "Moretti's table opens in 3 weeks. And I'm thinking, maybe after that, we start planning something else. Another restaurant. A family," he said it quietly, like he was testing the words. "I never thought I'd want that. Never thought I'd be the kind of man who could be a father without screwing it up. But with you, I want everything. Kids running through that farmhouse. teaching them to cook, showing them that the Moretti name can mean love instead of fear. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. That sounds perfect. Not perfect, Adrian corrected, but real. Messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. Outside the office, someone called their names. The dinner service was reaching its peak. Critics were asking for them. The restaurant needed its owners. But for just one more moment, they stayed there. Two people who'd found each other in fire and built something that would outlast the flames. Ready? Adrian asked, offering his hand. Isabella took it, her engagement ring catching the light. Always. They walked back into the dining room together, into the noise and heat and beautiful chaos of their creation. And Chicago, watching, judging, always analyzing, finally saw what they'd known all along. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about redemption. About proving that where you come from doesn't have to determine where you're going. It was about love being the only fire worth keeping. 1 year later, the Tuscan hills were golden. Moretti's table stood at the top of a gentle slope, surrounded by vineyards that Adrian and Isabella had planted themselves. The old farmhouse had been transformed, not into something modern and slick, but into something warm and alive. His grandmother's kitchen had been restored, expanded, made into the heart of a restaurant that felt more like coming home than going out to eat. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off stone walls that had been silent for too long. Local families mixed with visitors from Chicago, from Italy, from everywhere. There were no velvet ropes here, no dress codes. Just long wooden tables, good food, and the kind of welcome that made strangers feel like family. Isabella stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Adrian at the outdoor grill. He'd insisted on cooking outside for the opening, said his grandmother always believed the best food was made under open sky. "You're supposed to be resting," Maria called from inside, where she was managing the front of house. She'd moved from Chicago to help run Moretti's table, bringing her husband and grandchildren with her. "I'm standing." "That counts as resting," Isabella smiled. "Besides, I can't miss this." The opening had been quiet by design. No press, no critics, no grand announcements. Just an invitation to the community, come eat with us. The response had been overwhelming. Every table was full. People sat on the grass with plates balanced on their laps. Wine flowed. Music played. Carlos emerged from the kitchen with another tray of pasta. "Boss, we're running low on the cacio e pepe. Should I make another batch?" "Make 3, Isabella said. "And Carlos? Stop calling me boss. We've been over this." "Sorry, Isabella," he grinned. "Old habits." Adrian appeared beside her, smelling of wood smoke and herbs. His sleeves were rolled up, his face flushed from the heat of the grill. He'd never looked more handsome. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. "There's something I want to show you." He led her away from the restaurant, up a small path that wound through the vineyard. The evening sun painted everything amber and gold. In the distance, the hills rolled away forever. They stopped at the top of the vineyard, where a single olive tree stood, ancient, gnarled, still bearing fruit after 100 years. "My grandmother planted this," Adrian said, his hand on the rough bark. "The year she married my grandfather. She told me once that olive trees live for centuries, that they survive drought, fire, frost, that they get stronger with age." He turned to Isabella. "I used to think that was just a nice story, but now I understand. She was telling me that good things, real things, they endure. They survive the hard seasons. They grow deeper roots." Isabella took his hand, placing it on her belly where their daughter kicked. "She would have loved this. All of it. I think she'd love you most of all." Adrian's eyes were bright. "You gave me something I thought the Moretti family had lost forever, hope. A future that isn't haunted by the past." "We gave each other that," Isabella corrected. They stood there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of fire. Below them, laughter rose from Moretti's table. Music played. People ate and drank and celebrated the simple joy of being together. "I was thinking," Adrian said quietly, about something Ricci said. Back when he broke into Casa Verona. Isabella tensed slightly. Marco Ricci was doing better now, in therapy, working at a community center Adrian had funded, slowly rebuilding his life. But the memories still carried weight. He said I was like my father because I destroyed his life, Adrian continued. And at the time, I thought he was wrong. Thought I was nothing like Vincent. But he was right about one thing, I did destroy something. I destroyed the version of myself that was afraid to build anything permanent. Afraid to love. Afraid to plant roots because I thought I didn't deserve them. He looked at Isabella. You helped me destroy that fear. And in its place, we built this. He gestured to the restaurant, the vineyard, the life spreading out before them. A kingdom that has nothing to do with power or fear or violence. A kingdom built on honest work, good food, and love. And family, Isabella added, her hand on her belly. And family, Adrian agreed, his hand covering hers. A figure appeared on the path, Marco, his friend and head of security, though there was rarely anything to secure out here. Hate to interrupt, Marco called, but Chicago's on the phone. The mayor wants to give you both some kind of award for community development. Something about revitalizing the restaurant industry. Adrian looked at Isabella, eyebrows raised. What do you think? I think we'll take the call tomorrow, she smiled. Tonight, we're exactly where we need to be. Marco nodded and disappeared back down the path. Adrian pulled Isabella close, careful of her belly, and kissed her forehead. All my life, I fought for power, he said. Fought against my father's version of it. Fought to build my own. But it turns out, peace was the only crown worth wearing. Isabella turned in his arms to watch the sunset. Below them, their restaurant glowed with warmth and life. Their staff, their family, worked together in perfect rhythm. Their daughter kicked, impatient to join this world they'd built. And love, she said softly, is the only fire worth keeping. As the sun set over the Tuscan hills, Adrian Moretti and Isabella Conti stood together, watching their kingdom of kindness grow. The name Moretti would live on, not in fear or violence, but in every meal served with love, every family welcomed, every life transformed by the simple belief that people deserve second chances. The fire had burned away everything false. What remained was real. And it was beautiful. The end.